Matt,
Hey Joel, how are you?
well, it's been quite a while since I saw you. And
Yeah,
the reason for me summoning you here to my Zoom meeting is to talk about gig promotion. And
okay.
this was brought to mind for me when I was advertising under my own resources for my first Guitar Summit gig of 2023. And I was just marveling at how hard it was. It's always been difficult to get people out to hear music, especially in New York City. But there's certain dynamics at play in the world we live in 2023, which make it especially challenging. And I wanted to talk to you because I've known you for years. You're kind of a go-to publicist for people who are doing records and to some degree, obviously, for live music. And I'm curious on your take of the landscape now, where people should and should not be putting their energy in terms of promoting their gigs and just what the challenges are, how the landscape has changed.
Yeah, so I mean, things have changed immensely. I mean, just between the time that you did your first alternative guitar summit at Cornelia Street Cafe,
Thank you
uh,
for remembering that. Were you there?
yeah, I did the PR for you.
I'm sorry, I totally forgot that. That's amazing.
Yeah, and we remember we got Jim Fusilli from the Wall Street Journal to review it.
Yes, we sold out Cornelia Street Cafe
Right.
3 nights in a row.
Yeah, and that was probably 2011.
It was exactly 2011.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's off the top, so that's pretty good. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, very impressive. And that guy, what was his name? The uh, Pa- Paul
oh,
Weiss.
Paul Weiss, yeah,
Weiss. He booked the place, and he was a great guy.
yeah. Not
Yeah.
to say that Tom was a bad guy, but
No, no, no. It
so
was just different. A different regime came in, and I mean, hey, the Cornelia Street Cafe was a great place, and it's sort of
yeah, and I miss it. I think about like sometimes I think about, oh, what's playing at Cornelia Street, and then I remember, oh, it's not there anymore.
right. Anyway, I interrupted you. Please continue.
So that was a very different time. Back then there were probably in the New York Times, like when it was considered more of a local paper, or just, a paper for New Yorkers, um, both internally and externally. It was, there was like 23, 25 listings a week, I think,
Yeah.
and they were all annotated and they were all editorialized by either Nate Chinen or Ben Ratliff or John Perellis or, different, critics and whatever. There were 23 just jazz listings.
Yeah.
And now there's like one every 2 weeks, for the whole, New York scene, whether it's Manhattan, Brooklyn, upstate, regional, whatever.
Well, let me
It's like
interrupt you because I don't even know where to look for that anymore. You say there's one listing every 2 weeks. Where is it even listed?
it's in the weekend arts page, which is, I think, delivered on Saturday mornings. Um, it's like the arts section. It's in print. It's the weekend arts. Online, it's just like kind of, in the section called "What to Do This Week" or "Things to Do this
Okay.
week."
All right.
They
One listing.
reconfigured it, but under the darkness of the pandemic, they totally did away with all gig listings for not only jazz and pop music, but
Yeah.
for dance and theater, and I think for film. They kind of reconfigured all the coverage, and they kind of like, when New York shut down, they kind of like said, okay, well, we're just not going to do it for now, and because everything's dark and there's no point. And then, under dark of night, they just said, okay, we're just getting rid of this because, like, the view counts on the pages are not, commensurate with what we need to see in order to justify, this expense, because they hire a lot of freelance writers to fill in the blanks with that stuff. I mean, it used to be before the pandemic, and even before then, that the New Yorker would have 2 to 3 jazz listings a week. Now there's one, and now there's like 3 pop listings intermingled with the jazz listings. It used to be like jazz and cabaret had its own little section, and then rock and pop and hip hop, whatever, and then like, dance, theater, classical music had its own thing, and that's a
Yeah,
whole other topic about classical music institutionally having its own desk, its own like entity, gravitas, whatever, like energy world, I mean, at the New York Times, you have a pop music desk and you have a classical music desk, and the classical music desk employs far more people than the pop music desk does, I believe,
hmm,
overall. I mean, for just, and I know classical music is just as expansive a genre classification as pop music, um, but that there's like at least 2 or 3 staff critics that are on the Time staff, and then there's like 5 or 6 active freelancers. Whereas in pop, there's like the pop editor, who's Karen Gans, and then there's the pop critic, who's John Perellis, and then there's the chief pop critic, that's John Perellis. The second in command is John Caramonica in terms of like seniority, just whatever he covers, hip hop and whatever, and R&B and even some country music and all kinds of stuff. It's usually stuff that relates to what they call youth culture, or just kind of like
yeah.
very, very mainstream taste, that people all over the world could read about. See, that's the thing. That's the shift that's occurred with the Times. And I don't mean to just focus on the Times, but the Times was, the lifeblood of our scene for a long time. It was really the thing that made everything, turn.
It made a difference. I mean, I could really tell when one of my events was selected as a weekly. Sometimes the Guitar Summit actually had a feature selection.
Like it was a box with a photo.
Yeah, with and every time it was Nels Klein's picture on there, um, Mr. Photogenic, and it really made a difference in how many people showed up. And and there was Time Out New York
There
also
was Time Out. There
that
was The
was
Voice.
useful
There
to
was The
some
Village
degree.
Voice.
The Village Voice, and so now that that's all gone, I mean, we could lament the end of newspapers and
Yeah,
magazines.
right. We could just talk about that on and on. But yeah, there are things that can be done that, you know, do some are free and some are not free. Some are kind of like you could but some people might see them as tacky or whatever, but they just are what they are. And so
Yeah,
one of the big things that is, having an account on Meta Business Manager, which is Facebook's parent company,
yeah.
and taking ads that are, ideally video ads. Video ads perform better than still imagery as it exists on those platforms because basically Facebook is trying to compete with YouTube as a video hub, and Instagram falls into that as well. But really, I think that uh, you have to make ads that are kind of geared towards the dimensions that they want, by ideally a professional designer, but not really. You don't have to do that. You can do a lot with this mobile app called Canva. There's a number of like DIY design apps that are very easy to use that a lot of people use.
Let me interrupt that because that's kind of a fine point I think most musicians miss. So when you say formatting, you're talking about formatting your video so that it fits.
Formatting your video artwork to either a mobile screen dimension or whatever the rectangular dimension is for Facebook feed videos, as opposed to like a little ad that you used to see on the side, like those little text ads you see on Gmail. Those are all bought and those are all indexed by like literally what words you have in your email, what words you have in your search history, and all that. Google ads are a little bit harder to um, ensnare jazz with, because the something about the ad inventory is so large, and a lot of it is being bought by huge corporations, and you can't easily micro target for the with the bang for your buck that you can with Facebook ads. That's what's been told to me by various marketers. So like you have to invest much larger sums of money in Google AdWords to get the same kind of visibility results as Facebook. Facebook is really, really geared towards very deeply granular stuff. Like you could you could really, if you went deep enough, in the back end of the Facebook or the Meta Business Manager, you can identify, PhDs in the zip code 11215 who shop at Whole Foods and do yoga. You could narrow those
Wow.
down.
So
Um,
when you're working with somebody in this capacity where let's say you're handling their record and they're doing a big CD release show or something, and you're helping advertise
Yeah,
their
so the Facebook Business Manager, Meta Business Manager stuff is an essential component to every campaign, almost every campaign. Some campaigns on the lower end of the spectrum, it's like you're on your own with your digital marketing. We can't, but if you're paying a certain amount with our company or whatever, or you bought into a gig promotion package that's at a certain level, we will of course include all of the business manager expertise in our push, and so I'll give you an example. We worked on David Murray at the Village Vanguard in January, where he premiered a new band with Marta Sanchez and Luke Stewart and Casa Overall. Obviously, David Murray is a big name, but in today's marketplace, where David Murray doesn't have huge social media following. He may have before, but some things changed in his life, and he didn't have access to that stuff anymore. So he needed some juice behind his thing. Like kind of, I would say 1/3 of the campaign was digital marketing and targeting people by income and by interests and by geographic location and all that. And then the other 2/3 was really inviting every possible journalist who means anything in the New York area to come see this band. And, some of them wrote about it in advance, some of them didn't, some of them wrote about it afterwards. There was a review of the performance in The Wire. There was a WNYC piece that Peter Orlov did. There was a piece, a very short preview in the New Yorker, which was that one listing for that whole week, but it was something. And we did the advanced publicity probably 6 weeks in advance. Starting six. Sometimes we start early as 8 weeks in advance for just a gig publicity. But something like that, David Murray, is much different from, like, let's say you hire me for gig promotion for a gig at Bar Lunatico in Brooklyn. You're not going to get the weekly New York Times pick. Like
No,
you're,
I wouldn't think that that would be useful for anybody because
yeah,
there's two
but you
questions.
could
There's
do
two
the
questions. What
yeah.
First of all, I'm curious at how much time you spend when you're hired to do something like this, just on the business meta aspect of things. And then I'm also curious how one decides how much is worth spending on these ads, like what you need to throw at an ad for it to make any difference. Because if you're doing a gig that pays you $300 and you're spending $100 on an ad, what's the point?
Right, right. Well, there may not be a point for that kind of gig where you're only making $300. It may just be you're going to do a lot of organic posting, which is just regular posting on a regular basis. Another thing that we do is we come up with a content schedule of, like, this day you're going to post this day you're going to post this day you're going to post this day this is going to be a still image, this is going to be a video, this is going to be an archival photo, whatever, blah blah blah. We set you up with that. We don't necessarily execute the posting of those things, but we do, kind of create a content schedule. That usually happens more frequently with a record campaign, although it has happened where, especially when we're doing festival publicity or publicity for a premiere of a new work at, like, let's say the Miller Theater or Jazz Lincoln Center or Roulette or whatever, there's a big push towards, one event. And it's like a lead up. Like we did gig publicity for the Jakob Bro the Tomasz Stanko thing at Roulette with Jakob and Lovano and Robbie Coltrane and Potter and Taborn and all that. And like we had a whole like content calendar for all that to lead up to that. And that made sense because like it was sponsored by the Polish government. It was like, it wasn't like a money losing gig. It was funded,
Yeah.
So I think the only real times when you can economically realistically do this are when the gig is funded by a grant or something
Yeah.
like that, or it's just like there's a corporate sponsor or something like that. I don't think it's really viable to do, but musicians should educate themselves on Meta Business Manager, even though it's very awful to deal with, like on a like it's just painstaking, and it, unless you really like data and you like drilling down on like that kind of stuff. I mean, if you're above 50, the chances are you're not gonna get into that level of just getting in the back end of Facebook and looking at all this.
My friends and I are
Yeah.
constantly complaining about what a pain in the ass all that
Yeah,
is.
it's not just a pain in the ass, but it's actually prohibitive. Like it's made for an expert, to go
Yeah.
like the people who do that kind of work have trained and taken courses to complete like a certification to be certified in that. I mean, you don't have to do that. There are people who don't do that. I actually never personally did that, but I mean, to be really 100% honest with you, I have contractors who do this work. I do some of it. I do it from a bird's eye view. I do from a perspective of, strategy and big picture, but I don't get down in the nitty gritty. And so,
Yeah, yeah,
one,
sure.
one of the big things that we do, that we encourage our clients to do, is to A/B test. So you have one ad with the same copy running with at the same time with another ad with the same copy but a different photo or a different video, and you see which one works better. And then okay, I'm going to put more money into the ad that's really working, that's catching people's eyes. um, you would start with like, a budget of $25. You would space that out for like a week, um, and you would see which does better. And you can ABC, you can ABCD, you can see many different stuff. You really have to figure out, okay, what's the best content, what's catching people's eyes, what's making them stop in the scrolling, whatever, to stay and watch that video. I mean, these videos we're talking about are only like 15 to 30 seconds at most.
Yeah.
But it's really a science of like figuring out what is that key moment in the video where people are going to actually stop and stop scrolling and look, or let that video finish on Instagram stories or whatever. Um, so
Okay. So let's say that, um, well, I'll just use myself as an example. Let's say I'm promoting the Guitar Summit, which is typically what I use this for. I mean, I'll try to promote CDs that are coming out, but that's a little different. Um, to what degree do you think? Well, first of all, you say you use contractors. There are people I've worked with and hired, didn't really charge much money, to help me with all this, and I found that they had some ability. Um,
depends on who the person is.
I
It
don't know
really
how.
depends.
Did they have a lot of the tools that you're talking about, or take the time to do some of that stuff? I doubt it. It sounds like the people you work with do a pretty deep dive into some of this data.
So like you have to know that yeah, again, it's not for your run of the mill gig at Lowlands or gig at, you know, if you're in Boston, the Middle East or whatever, or your gig at Twins Lounge, it's not for that. I mean, you can do it for that, but like you're not gonna see any appreciable results with investment of, time and resources. I mean, not only are you paying for the ads themselves, but you're paying for our time in terms of expertise. So typically in the realm of $25 to $40 an hour of our time and expertise. So you asked earlier, how many hours are we putting into each campaign in terms of the Meta Business Manager? I would say we're putting in 10 to 20 hours at about $25 to $40 an hour. So you're looking at between $250 and $400 just in consulting fees. And then the ads themselves cost whatever they cost. But we usually don't exceed an ad budget for a single gig, a single event of $300, maybe $400. I mean, if it's a big festival running over multiple days with a lot of kind of funding behind it, we could easily spend $2,000, $3,000 in ads, but still the the amount of, it depends on if the client is providing the creative. Like sometimes we create the creative from assets that are given to us by the client, including existing videos and photos, and sometimes audio, kind of intermingling those and editing them together. But sometimes the artist has what they want and what they want to use, and we just take little snips and implement them, or we A/B test them versus one against the other and see which works best, and then we go from there.
So if,
Um,
let's just say that somebody's on their own, they're promoting their local gig, and it's something they want to put a little muscle behind, but they can't hire a publicist, which is true of course,
yeah, I mean,
99.
you don't. Most of the people who do this are considered digital marketing consultants. I don't consider this publicity. I'm not, and I am traditionally concerned. People see me as a publicist, but I'm a publicist. I'm a digital marketer. I'm a strategist. I'm like a lot of these things. So
Yeah.
like,
So let's
if
say
they
people
don't
are
have the
doing a,
money, if they don't have the money to hire an expert, I would educate yourself on what Facebook Business Manager is, what Meta Business Manager is.
yeah.
Go in, take a look, see what you can figure out on your own. Maybe take a course. It's not out of the question. It's not like rocket science. I mean, it's not like advanced equations of mathematics. It's really not that. It's ticking a box, doing a drop down menu. You have to understand the thing called CPM, cost per billion, or clicks per million, or whatever. But you have to understand certain basic advertising terms. But like beyond that, it's not that hard. I mean, you have to like be you have to be cautious with how much you spend, because anybody does on a budget. But like, you can figure out some stuff, and don't use the boost button. Do not ever, ever, ever use the boost button.
Okay, really?
The
Why?
boost button is a very imprecise way to advertise to people who already know what's going on with you. I mean, the boost button will only, as far as I'm aware, it will only increase the number of people who are already following your page that actually get to see that content. It won't go to people who are outside your realm. Like, there's this thing called lookalike audiences in Facebook, and it's not just a Facebook thing. It's a broader term, but you can upload an email list. You can take the alternate Guitar Summit email list. You can upload it to Facebook, and they will match every address that corresponds to his existing Facebook account. And if it's not the address that they use, it won't associate with anything. But you can then take that data set of people who are already subscribed to your mailing list, directly target them with ads. They're going to see the ads, but then you can do this thing with Facebook where Facebook takes that data. They says, okay, what users have data that looks like this but aren't these users? aren't any of them. And they will make a separate data set with people who like similar artists, have similar levels of education, have similar interests outside music, all these things. When you click they're collecting all this data on you. So it's data essentially for advertisers. It's not for them. It's, you can share with your friends, I like Seinfeld, I like The Big Lebowski, but it's actually going to a much broader set of people. And that's what all this stuff was on the Hill with Mark Zuckerberg and the political ads and Russia and all that. It was, people didn't really know that they were consenting to all this data collection. So a lot of people abandoned Facebook at that point. But it's still, enough people are sitting on Facebook and Instagram all day. These data points are readily available to any advertiser who knows how to use them. And jazz musicians just have to act like any other advertiser and be like, I'm going to hustle my shit this way because it's the only way anybody's going to see anything about me, barring the existence of any listings in any place that used to exist. This is the only way anybody's going to find out about my gig. Now, also, I will say this: email lists are way, way, way more effective than any form of either paid or organic social
I
media.
never get emails from anybody about gigs anymore, like
Right.
very rare.
And it's because email lists are hard to build, they're hard to maintain, and they're a drag that people don't want to set up a MailChimp and do that for a little, $100 gig. But if you do a monthly newsletter or a quarterly newsletter, most people know if they're playing at Lunatico or they're playing at Barbez, they're playing at, Jazz Lincoln Center, they know 3 months in advance that they're playing. Those places book far out. They know they can put together a blast that's like several weeks in advance. Like, here's all the stuff I'm doing, and
Yeah.
I get those from certain people and I really appreciate them. I mean, I get them from you, I get them from Helen Sung, I get them from gosh, occasionally Julian Lage will send something very, very infrequently, but when he has a big tour, that you'll get something.
Yeah.
Joshua Redmond sometimes sends stuff. You get them from venues, obviously. Venues are very interested in selling tickets. But it has, I think the Facebook Instagramification of society has spawned a culture that does not appreciate the directness of email, but at the same time, Gmail and other mail clients have their own ways of filtering out, spam, and so they see any email from a mass email sender like MailChimp or Constant Contact or iContact or whatever one of these programs, they
Yeah.
they see that as a promotion, and then they put that through to a separate folder unless that person has added you to their address book, which is a drag in any client to actively like
Yeah.
whitelist, allow certain advertisers or businesses or musicians to get through to your email. So it's like, it's hard on the one hand to make sure that everybody sees it on email, but it is more likely that they're going to see it because there's not going to be this algorithm throttling whether Facebook has decided that it's relevant to a person based on who else is advertising to them, based on how many interactions they've had with that person in a given month or a given week or a given year. I mean, there's many friends of mine, I don't see any of their stuff unless I go and I wish them a happy birthday, and then all of a sudden I see all their stuff because
Okay, so
Facebook.
that's my next question,
Yeah.
because ads aside, which I think we're all sort of forced to do now and then. What is I have found I'm not a frequent poster on Facebook. It's definitely not part
And
of my gig.
there's no way they know this. If you have a certain number of friends, there's no way you can go and check in on the 200 to 300 friends that you really care about every month. There's no way. No one has time for that.
So, but my question is, what is the actual utility as far as promotion? I'm not talking about just talking about your cat or what you ate for dinner. As far as actual gig promotion, what is the utility of being on these platforms without taking ads? What do you need to do to so that your people are actually hearing about, seeing your post? Because
I
I
mean,
I feel like I never see posts by from 90% of the people who are part of 99% of the people who I'm friends with. I never see anything by most people. I
well,
don't
yeah,
know.
and
People say,
Facebook.
"Hey, you didn't hear about my gig? It was on Facebook." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I didn't see it. Of
Right.
course I
Well,
didn't see it."
it's important. The utility of being on these platforms is only as good as the your ability to keep up with friends actively, and most people don't have time for that. And so Facebook sees it as their mission to prioritize what you should see. And so you can't really trust Facebook or Instagram to show you the stuff that you actually want to see. Now, Instagram has an option when you go through it. It actually allows you to toggle between what's recommended for you and what's your like the default is what's recommended, and that's usually the people with the least amount of clothing on or a playing video or whatever. The stuff that you're actually following, this is like the latest thing that has been posted. Like, you know, I'm posting a bunch of there's a bunch of accounts here, but the I can actually see chronologically, okay, Jimmy Cash Rules posted this janitor tips, tricks in action 3 minutes ago. Florida Man posted this, meme or whatever, 4 minutes ago. Trinosofts in Detroit posted this gig poster, uh, or a journal poster, whatever it is, 5 minutes ago. Pitchfork posted the Coachella 2023 set times are finally here 6 minutes ago. This is actually chronological. I don't think there's currently any way on Facebook to see your timeline chronologically. I think they wiped that out because they want everyone to advertise, and I mean, they haven't really worked out the part of it where it's like friends who actually want to keep up with each other. There's an ability to be quote close friends with somebody where, but I think you can only have about 30 or 50 close friends. They only allow you to see 30 or 50 people. Their business is making you pay for your stuff to be seen. Even if you're a private individual, I mean, they don't really give you an opportunity to do that, but they figure that the reality is you're only going to really want to see about 40 to 50% of, I mean, less. I mean, I probably have about 2,200 friends on Facebook on my personal profile. I'd probably see content from 10% of those people.
So do you think if you care about this, that it's important then when you see something by
You
somebody
have
and
to you
you
have
want to
to
hear by
supplement.
them that you like their
Yes,
post? And
yes, that's very important, very important.
okay, so
But like that's not possible because like unless you search for, Dan Weiss or Miles Okazaki or, you know, Stefan Crump or whatever, who's in your circle, um, you're not going to see them. It's going to prevent you from seeing them. So you have to take other measures. You have to do email. A lot. It's so easy to go on these platforms and just share, share. But it's like you also have to nothing can replace musical composition, right? There's nothing that can replace that. So like what we have to do with promotion is like bring back the email tree or the phone tree thing, right? Like bring back the fan club, the hotline. I've seen people, literally current stars, have a hotline again, where fans can call in, leave messages, and
really,
the star will listen to, or their assistants will listen to stuff, and they'll call them back, or whatever they do, they'll they'll inform them of whatever news they're looking for. And obviously people leave spam messages, and that's the nature of the internet in 2023. But like if you're niche enough, you can set up a hotline for like nothing, and like you could just get messages from people who might want to call in and talk to you. I mean, I think that, during the pandemic, it was really popular to go live on Instagram. That was a thing that a lot of people were doing. I was doing it even. I mean, I was just looking for connection with people. And like, I think that a lot of the more successful artists, like let's say Becca Stevens, like even what's his name? The the organ player who used to play with Snarky Puppy is Corey Henry.
Yeah.
He does these Twitch streams, and people tip him, and he still does them even though touring is back.
Yeah.
Um,
Dan Tepper does a lot of that.
well, yeah, I mean he does it more on like Facebook, but I think he's stopped most of those streams, and he's really out there touring now. And
Yeah.
but I think that a lot of artists and entities are, still making money on Twitch and other kind of Discord type platforms where they're just streaming to a bunch of fans uh, at random intervals and hoping people tune in. Some people get a notification that it's happening via email or via push notification. I mean, the reality is there's so many ways to do this, but like a big, big, big way is to consistently post in some fashion or another on a platform that you are prone to posting on. Facebook is much more likely to promote your content if you're actively using the platform as a poster. Uh, if
Yeah.
they really they reward people who post a lot
Yeah.
in terms of visibility. Um, and they don't reward people who don't post anything. They
Yeah.
they they throttle them way, way, way down.
So
You
do
know.
you feel that, in the field of publicity now, which is really expensive, I mean, and this is, I'm just going to pretend for a moment I'm not talking to a publicist because it's your business and we need your business. I'm not suggesting anything other than that, but the conversation with any artist is going to be, I'm putting out the CD, I'm not getting any money for it. The small record company is paying for it to be manufactured. I'm probably only going to sell how many copies these days? If I'm lucky, 500, 1,000 copies. If I'm not a kind of a star. And for that, let's talk realistically, I will probably see like a few $100s from the record company if I'm lucky. So, there, when you go shopping for a publicist, everybody's like thinking, how little can I pay and get something out of this, and how many reviews am I going to get? And I'm curious what your take is on the industry. If is how much use is anybody really getting in their career by getting 7 print reviews and blogs and kind of cool magazines around the world, or 12 of them, and to what degree is that even worthwhile anymore, except for a nice ego feeling, uh, as opposed to somebody who's going to really dig deep into this Facebook meta world and Instagram world that you're talking about, and just do that for you.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who are already just doing that. That's like more common definitely more common in hip hop, in rock, in all sorts of other arenas. Uh, you know, Basically, we're looking at not a lot of people are probably the right way to need publicity or warrant publicity. A lot of the people who are coming to us, don't really warrant a campaign for whatever reason, but we're being presented with a prospect of business, and we're probably not going to turn them away. I mean, I do turn away people that I don't think are are worthy or whatever. Some people who are worthy, I also know from the get-go that I can't really get them that much, and I tell them that ahead of time. And
When
and
you
I
say
and it,
worthy, just because that's, I just want to clarify what you're talking about is you're not really sure whether what at the end of the day when they pay you, whether you're going to
when
give
I
them
say
something that's
worthy, I
really
mean
going to be worth their while.
newsworthy, like
Yeah.
how magazines and websites will deem their their products. Will they see them as relevant or irrelevant? I mean, there's a lot has to do with identity politics these days. If you're, you know, a white man, there are many, many websites and magazines who are going to, say, we have enough white men coverage. We need more, you know, non-binary coverage. We need more, uh, coverage of people of color. We need more coverage of women, and that's just a reality that we're dealing with right now. And I see that play out not just from minority and uh, women journalists. I see it from white male journalists on a regular basis.
Yeah.
They are very conscious of what the cultural climate is right now, and they're looking for diversity. And I mean, I look at my client roster a lot of times and I see, oh, shoot, I have all men this month. I have like 4 women this quarter. That's not good. That doesn't show well on me. But like at the same time, did enough women approach me that I could have had parity or whatever? I mean, I don't know. These are hard things to discuss, and I'm one of the few people who is willing to discuss these things because I think it's really, really important that a person who's going to sink 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 grand on a publicist, know up front that a lot of the media that you're pitching to are extremely, extremely conscious of who they're writing about in terms of, what their gender identity is, what their race is, what their ethnic background is, and a lot of that stuff plays into who gets more attention and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's just a fact. I mean, it's
Well,
good in the sense that
yeah.
white men had hegemony over the entire human race for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
It's bad that a lot of the people that it affects weren't part of that ruling class, so to speak.
Well,
uh,
but we know that um, in the world of publicity and the world of the arts, that it's never just been about music or dance or theater. There's always reasons why somebody's going to get written about that have um, external re, an external logic to what's actually being created. So what you talked about, and this is an old thing. I mean, I don't think this is we're telling anybody anything they don't already know. But the thing is, you have to have a story to your record. So what's the
yeah.
story? So I've
I mean,
released
yeah,
records
if
that
you're
were kind of
like, don't get me wrong, don't get me wrong. If you're a white man who has a great story, you're going to get written about. You
yeah.
know,
But
like,
what does that mean? I mean, I know what it means. So I'm asking this rhetorically. I think I know what it means, but give us an example of
if someone asks you questions about your music, can you talk about it intelligently and in a way that is inviting to the general listener, not in terms of, oh, there's this really cool chordal shift in this measure, and there's this like, something or other cadence in this measure, and that's not what people want to hear about. They want to hear about like what actual real world things inspired this work. What is your day to day like what is your life like? Tell me about you and your life through your music or your words. Like, that's what people want to hear. I mean, when you tune into NPR, almost everything you hear is kind of like human interest. It's like,
yeah.
oh, this is an interesting story, like, and a lot of it is gimmicky for sure. And I've had clients who have literally made music and known that they had to make up a gimmick in terms of narrative to sell their music, to sell their story for the media, and they've just fabricated a gimmick, and I've used that gimmick and it's worked.
So give us an example. and it doesn't have to be from your posse of like a good couple of good stories on CDs. And this again, this has nothing to do with the content of the music.
Well, again, let's just talk in terms of like the real world. Most people are not consuming CDs. Most people are
I'm
streaming.
sorry, I say
Yeah,
CD is a shorthand.
right.
A record. Yeah.
Yeah. One good story that recently came out that was, born of frustration and crisis and horrible circumstances was Lakeisha Benjamin, who's a fine alto saxophonist, was in a near-death car accident. She almost died, and she, had tons of injuries and fractures, and had to
Wow.
have multiple surgeries. I think, whatever. I don't know, maybe not to that extent, but it was really bad. And she came back from it, and she made the best record of her life with the best people that she had ever worked with. And she worked with people outside of her immediate sphere who had a lot of cachet. Georgia Ann Muldrow was on the record. There was a bunch of other folks. I mean, her previous record had Robbie Coltrane, had Lonnie Plaxico, may have had Greg Osby. It had a lot of people that were like, wow, she's really going for it. They had Brandy Younger on it. But this one was like, it was on a bigger label. It was on Whirlwind. She had a great publicist, Lydia Liebman, and she, you know, capitalized on that narrative. And I saw features everywhere. I saw the New York Times. I saw the cover of Downbeat. Saw the cover of Jazzwise. I saw, the Washington Post. I saw many different places covered it, and it was about a misfortune that she suffered and how she overcame that misfortune, both in real life and musically. And it was something that, made people hopeful and happy.
Yeah.
Um, that was a great story. And the album was called Phoenix because she rose like a phoenix from the ashes to greatness, or to success, to a better life. Um, and now she's I mean, granted that this was probably in the works before the album came out, but she's also the artist in residence at the Monterey Jazz Festival, which is a very coveted role, and very prominent. Um, so, and I think she's playing Newport and whatever. It's just, and another example that's recent, former client, but still a good friend, is Dan Tepfer, who did this, Bach Reimagined
Yeah.
project.
Yeah. That's a great record.
Worked with Surefire, who don't are not cheap. Definitely not cheap. We're talking over $10,000 commitment uh, of money. He had a label front that money for him. Um, I don't think
Surefire is a publicist.
Surefire is a PR firm, yeah,
Yeah.
PR digital marketing firm. And I mean, Dan has this backstory as a computer programmer. He has a degree in physics. Um, he's he's an interesting person. He climbs mountains. He does surfing. He does all kinds of stuff outside of music, and all of that stuff makes him more interesting and more compelling to talk about, just on the terms of his music, because he lives life like very, he lives his life very, I don't know, to the fullest, whatever. Like he doesn't keep his life private. I mean, he keeps it private to a certain extent, but he doesn't, like, he's not one of these musicians who says, I only want to talk about my music. What does all this other shit matter? It unfortunately, it does matter.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be a human being and relatable as a human being in order to relate to other people
Yeah.
who want to hear about other human beings. I mean, literally all we, everything we do every day, except for people who are, biologists or whatever, is somehow interrelated with other human beings. We're interested in largely our own species or other living things, and yeah, we're interested in non-living things too. I mean, whatever. But like, humans like to hear about stories about other humans. That's
Yeah.
just a, you know,
So tell me what your take is, because I see what I see putting out my own records and talking to my friends and stuff, but you, as a publicist who works with a lot of different people and kind of has a finger on the pulse of the jazz industry, if sounds like a big cliche I just uttered, but
yeah, I don't have my finger on the pulse of the jazz industry, but I see the jazz industry in effect
well,
every
you've
day.
got, yeah, that's an, okay. So, but you have kind of a bit of a bird's eye view because of the work you do and the people you talk to. You're in touch with journalists and et cetera, et cetera, and you're a fan of the music. What do you see as changes that have occurred in the in the business in the past 5 or 10 years? What are some of your biggest gripes? What do you think some of the biggest problems are? Because we all know it's harder and harder to get anybody to actually spend money on anything. That any Most of the people who are going to hear your music, you're never going to see or get a dime from because they're streaming it. Uh,
I mean, yeah, I think that those are all, you know, uh, valid gripes. I mean, I don't think we're coming back from this culture of free. I think the door was open to it when musicians and the music industry failed to value themselves higher than they did. The film industry obviously, definitely protected itself a lot more viably or whatever. I mean, obviously the film industry was always bigger than the music industry in terms of dollars and cents and whatever. But I think, yeah, I mean, I would argue one of the worst things that's happened is the rise of social media and that taking the place of the genuineness of good music. However, social media has also allowed many, many, many more musicians to have the opportunity to share their music with the world. When you were growing up, and even when I was growing up, there was a major label system that only allowed a certain number of releases to come out every year. And the releases that did come out were, uh, by big stars. And you know, but they were only stars because the music industry could actually control how many people could be stars,
yeah,
right? Like,
and there's
like
still
it's the
some of that
same thing.
going
It's the
on.
same thing with the independent film industry and the streaming film industry. Like, a lot more shows could be made now because there are these niche markets for them, um, and
Yeah,
the costs of putting them out there are shouldered by corporations that you know are making the money from the Ray Charleses and the Nora Joneses and the Doja Cats and the what the
right.
Bruno Marses, all those people, and Beyonce and Lady Gaga and you know
Yeah,
Rosalia and all these just giant people who are funding all the little stuff. I mean,
yeah. So a lot
I
of
mean,
us
I
have
mean,
had to.
the social media sucks. You know, the fact that nobody will pay for anything sucks. Uh, but at the same time, like, if you really hustle your Bandcamp shit and you aren't on a label for a couple records or whatever, I mean, you don't have to go with a label. Like, I don't think there's, I think labels are less and less valuable today
Oh,
as
okay,
they don't.
that's my segue. Yeah,
I
that
think
that
that
I
I think that people the fact that people can go and find your stuff on Apple, on Spotify, on wherever, on Bandcamp. The beautiful thing about Bandcamp is the recommendation system. By following other fans or labels or whatever, you can see what your peers are buying and you can check it out for yourself. Then you can buy it yourself. And
oh,
and you know,
okay. So I would find personally instructive for you to answer the following question. So recently I started the Alternative Guitar Summit label, mainly just because there was too much music that I was making and that I thought was worthy of people listening to expect any label to put it out. And yeah, I'm not the greatest businessman, but it's still been really challenging for me. And I don't think frankly, I don't think since it's brand new, I've necessarily given it everything I've got from a business perspective. So I would love to hear you give me or anybody else, because there's hundreds of us that are releasing our own music now. Kind of like if you want to anybody to hear your music and you're releasing something, keep in mind I'm not just releasing my own music. There'll be other people too. What do you need to do for your own label?
Well, one of the things you need to do is you need to find, well, you can do one of two things. You can really, really, really hustle it on your own and do, if you're going to put it on streaming platforms, you can do everything you possibly can to promote it on those platforms for free. That includes participating in Spotify for artists. That includes participating in Apple Music for artists. These are free programs that you just sign up for, you verify you are who you are. There's a vetting process, and then you have control over your profiles on those platforms. I think Amazon Music has a vetting process as well. And Amazon shouldn't be discounted because it's a huge streamer. I mean, anybody who has an Alexa in their house can sign up for the Amazon streaming. And I think anyone who signs up for Amazon Prime, which is more of us than we'd like to admit, probably has a default subscription to Amazon Music or some basic form of streaming in terms of the music they bought. I think every CD, every album that I bought on Amazon in the last 12 or 15 years is available to me to stream through an Amazon Music app that I don't really use, but a lot of people do use that. A lot
Yeah,
of people. So what I'm saying is you have to use all the free platforms at your disposal. You have to learn how to write those pitches for playlists. You have to learn how to write a single paragraph review, like not a review, but a story from a human interest standpoint that says, why is this track interesting? Why is it compelling? Where will it hit people the hardest? Like, where will its message hit the hardest? What markets? Like, whether that be Spain or Germany or Italy or France or Japan or South Korea or South Africa or Argentina, whatever, like wherever you have fans, wherever you've played before, those are the places that you're most likely to have, a following. But you can go into these platforms, you can claim your profile, and you can look at all the stuff that's been streamed in the past, whether it's from Sunnyside or whatever, you in your case, Sunnyside, maybe it's Whirlwind, maybe it's Cuneiform. I don't think Cuneiform streams, so there's nothing there. But um, you can look at all the data and you can see, okay, I'm really big in South Korea, Germany, and the UK, and those are the places where I'm going to actually spend ad dollars to promote my stuff, whether it's an ad on Facebook promoting Bandcamp or an ad on a YouTube channel promoting Bandcamp or an ad on whatever Instagram stories promoting a pre-order for a gig or whatever it is. But like you have to centralize, you know, where you want people to go for your music. Ideally, Bandcamp is the preferred choice, and you communicate that in your communications in email. You say that Bandcamp supports artists, and we would really love it if you would support us through Bandcamp. If you want to stream it, it's available there too. Or we only choose to work with these two streaming companies because we feel that they are more fair to artists than Spotify or whatever, or there's an argument that Tidal is a better company because they actually show all the credits for every album that you put out
yeah,
if you provide all that metadata, which most labels do. However, if you're running your independent label, you have to be sure that you're providing that metadata on who plays every instrument to the distributors. So either if you're working with uh, DistroKid or you're working with, let's say, CD Baby. I don't recommend CD Baby because they're very stringent on the way that singles get released, pre-release, and all that. DistroKid, TuneCore, Seven Digital. There's a website called Ari's Take, which is a really good resource for musicians who want to run their own record labels. Ari's Take is also a blog and a podcast. And the guy Ari Herstand wrote a book called The New Music Business, I think.
Huh.
And it's very good and it's constantly being updated. He just released an audiobook of it. Its third edition. 100 pages of it have changed since its first publication. It's
Wow.
constantly evolving. So I think you have to learn how to write an elevator pitch, a 3 to 4 sentence description of a song or an album or whatever. You have to learn how to use the free platforms, and you have to go to the websites of the places and really learn how to do the most with the tools they're providing. And you have to get hip to how to advertise, and how to advertise effectively, and how to advertise without spending too much money per ad. That's something you learn with trial and error. I mean, there are things you can read, but no one will ever be writing an article on how much a jazz musician should spend at economy of scale. That article doesn't exist. If it does, it'll be on jazzfuel.com, because that website is particularly geared towards people who are jazz musicians who want to do everything DIY. I
So
really highly recommend Jazz Fuel.
Jazz Fuel.
Yeah, .com.
So in my opinion, you or somebody else should have a course that you give that talks about all the things that you
Yeah,
do.
so Jazz Fuel does that. They offer courses in all this stuff.
Oh, okay.
And
Wow.
I've given an interview there. I've even talked about giving a course there, but I haven't done it yet. But like, yeah, there's courses to take. Ari's Take offers really great courses in how to maximize streaming without paying for ads, how to uh, book college gigs through student activity fees at colleges and universities across the country and even Canada. They offer a course on music licensing, sync licensing, um, and there's all kinds of courses available out there. It's just a matter of what you do with them, and how hard you hustle, and then also how well you network with people who can possibly bring you to a higher level of, that it's the equivalent of, okay, I can't afford to hire a publicist, but I can afford to take 10 people to dinner, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and, some people will accept the dinner or the drink or whatever. I mean, the drink is the cheap version, but, or the coffee or whatever, but some people won't, and that's fine. And you have to respect their wishes. And, some people want to be paid for all of their expertise, whether it's, on an hourly basis or a monthly basis or
Yeah.
whatever. And you don't, there's nobody holding a gun to your head saying you have to spend this money, you have to hire a publicist, you have to do Facebook ads. I mean, but if you do want to be seen, you know and noticed, not just in the American market but in other markets too. I mean, America is not the whole world. There's a whole other world out there. And like, we work in a PR sense, but also in the digital marketing sense, well outside the U.S.
Yeah.
And I think people really need to look at other markets as a mean and look at the data. Look hard at your data that's provided to you by Facebook when you do these promotions, that's
Hmm.
provided to you by Apple Music, that's provided to you by Spotify. Look where your fans are,
Yeah.
and get as granular as possible. If you have like a small little subset of fans, or even one fan in Sarajevo, you could you could figure out who that person is. It would not be incredibly difficult to find out who that person is, even if you have to like message them on some platform, the back end of Instagram or Bandcamp or whatever. I advocate people forming direct direct communication with their fans on Bandcamp, because those people are saying, here's $25. I want to support you.
Right.
Like the chances of them actually wanting to interact with you as if they would after a show are fairly high, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Those people, you have to build, and then when you establish that personal connection with those people are going to tell their friends, hey man, I'm talking to Joel Harrison, he's like messaging with me, he's interested in me. Like, I mean, yeah, that's not for everybody. I mean, this is not one size fits all, but it's just
No.
those little things that
Yeah,
really
yeah.
do,
I mean,
go
and
a
it's a
long way.
lot. That's the thing. It's, you know, there's plenty of people just putting out records, not doing any of that. And this is kind of a wake up call for me because I'm really lazy about this stuff. I just don't like doing it. But I think that
You can
everything you're
hire
talking about is
you
important.
can hire a person who's a personal assistant to just do all this stuff, and they're not a publicist, but they can message people in your voice on Bandcamp and say, hey, did you enjoy the order? Did you
Yeah,
enjoy?
but you got to find somebody if you're going to really do what you're talking about. You also have to find somebody who's got some chops in doing what you're talking about. You don't want somebody just learning that on the fly. And they're out there for sure.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I'm uh, really enjoyed hearing about all this stuff, and I really appreciate you giving the time to do this. I think this is going to be really useful to people who hear it.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop
Thank you.
recording now. Thanks, Matt.
All right.